So just to go over a couple more problems, in this problem for using our xy table to find solutions to an equation, if you notice the example equation that I'm using here does not have a variable by itself on one side of the equal sign. So remember, if we think back to our properties of equality, that's something that's nice, is to get our variables on one side and our constants on the other. But in this case, we have two variables. So when we have two variables and we want to solve, it's usually good to get one variable all by itself. So another thing that you'll see in the homework is they provide you an xy table and you have to find, so in this case, we're going to let x equal 0 one time, we're going to let y equal 1 another time, and then we're going to let x equal 2 on the last time. So they will provide you an xy table and then you have to find the values. So when we have an equation that doesn't have a variable by itself, well, we just have to think back to what we learned in chapter 2 with our properties of equality and then solving for the variable that's still unknown. So I went ahead and rewrote each of the equations. So I let x equal 0 in the first one, I let y equal 1 in the second one, and I let x equal 2 in the last one. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and work through these using our properties of equality that we learned in chapter 2 and see what the y is, the x is, and the y is for each of the respective equations. All right, so if we look at our first one, 2 times 0 just equals 0, right? So that whole thing is just going to cancel out. Make that a little bigger. So now we're just going to have a negative 4y equals 6. Well, how do we get the y by itself? Because this is the variable that we're solving for. This is the unknown. Well, we have to use our properties of equality, and we'll use our division. Divide by a negative 4 on both sides. So our negative 4's will cancel out. And now we have y equals a negative 6/4. Can we reduce that? Yes, we can. So a negative 6/4 would reduce to a negative 3/2. And so that's what we would put, a negative 3/2. Hopefully you can see that. So our next one, using the orange marker, we have the y equals 1, so 2x minus 4 times 1 equals 6. 4 times 1 is going to equal 4. So we know that in order to get the x by itself, we need to go ahead and add and subtract terms first. So we're going to end up adding 4 to both sides. So 4 times 1 is 4, and this would be a negative 4. So negative 4 plus 4 is going to cancel both of those out. So now we're left with 2x equals 10. Is the x by itself yet? It's not. So we're going to have to use our properties of equality and divide by 2 on both sides. So if we divide by 2 on the left, the 2's will cancel out, leaving x by itself. And then we have 10 divided by 2 on the other side. So 10 divided by 2 would equal 5. So when y equals 1, x equals 5. And then our last equation that we have x equals 2. So I went ahead and replaced the x with the 2. 2 times 2 is 4, minus 4y equals 6. So again, we're going to have to subtract 4 from both sides. So we can just subtract 4. So a positive 4 minus 4, these will cancel out. And now we're left with a negative 4y equals, and what's 6 minus 4? 2. So to get the y by itself, we have one more thing that we need to do, and that's divide by a negative 4. Hopefully you can see that. So we're going to divide by a negative 4 on both sides. And 2 divided by negative 4 would be a negative 2/4, and we can reduce that to a negative 1/2. So negative 1/2. So we're using the properties that we learned in chapter 2. So just because we're moving on to another chapter doesn't mean we're never going to see that again. So we're still going to be using all of those properties throughout this chapter whenever we're trying to find solutions to equations. So this is just another example using a more complicated equation and where they give you the XY table values. You're not just making up your own. So you will have a chance in the homework where you're going to create your own XY tables, and there's some problems where they're going to have the XY table for you. So if you have any questions about any of these or any of the other concepts that are talked about in section 4.1, please reach out to me, and hopefully we'll have a good time answering everybody's homework questions whenever we see each other at our next Zoom conference.